This is a wolf, this is a jackal, and this is a coyote. They look strikingly similar.
For most people, it is hard to tell them apart, but they're very different animals.
A wolf weighs about 50 kg on average, hunts large prey, and lives in complex social packs. A coyote is much smaller. It weighs about 15 kg on average, hunts small prey, and lives alone or in much smaller groups. A jackal is much smaller, weighs about 10 kg, and relies on hunting and scavenging.
Look at bears. Polar bears, grizzly bears, and black bears. Similar yet different. Horses, donkeys, and zebras. Again, similar yet different.
Tons of similar examples exist in the animal kingdom. Different branches of a family tree diverging and coexisting. Except us, humans. Where are our cousins? Did they ever exist, or are we just a unique creation by God? Or did we them?
Welcome to the channel. Let's dive in.
Inside a cave of a limestone quarry, workers found bones that didn't quite look human. So they passed them on to a local school teacher. The fossil intrigued him because this particular skull was strange. It had heavy brow ridges and a long low shape, features that seemed almost ape-like. But when its brain size was estimated, it was far larger than that of any ape, well within the range of modern humans. This school teacher, along with a professor of anatomy, proposed something radical: that the remains of the cave did not belong to an ape, but an ancient and primitive human.
But here was the problem. It was the mid-19th century, when the biblical view of human creation still dominated thinking, even among the parts of scientific community. Humans were made the way they look. A prehistoric human was unthinkable for many. The backlash was intense. Many scientists rejected the claim outright, saying that the bones belonged to a diseased modern human. And for a moment, it looked like that was the end of the story. But then came a turning point. Just 3 years later, in 1859, Charles Darwin published his book on the origin of species. It talked about evolution and how evolution resembles a tree.
Just like a tree has branches and those branches have more branches and so on, organisms evolve over time and branch out, resulting in the wide diversity of life we see today. He called this the tree of life. It hinted that from a rat to a rhinoceros, bird to a blue whale, and houseflies to humans, every life form once had a common ancestor.
This idea was out of the box. It was out of the room that had the box. It indirectly supported the idea that the Neanderthal fossil belonged to an alternate human species. Unfortunately, even Darwin got a lot of heat for this theory, just like the school teacher and anatomist, if not more. Back to the Neanderthal fossil. As was the standard practice, casts of the skull were made and sent across Europe for research. And something interesting began to happen. This prompted researchers to revisit older discoveries, unexplained fossils that were found earlier but ignored.
Specifically, one that was discovered in 1829 in Belgium, roughly 35 years ago, and another one discovered in 1848 in Gibraltar, 15 years ago. Features of these two skulls looked strikingly similar to the one found in the cave. Soon, in 1864, Irish geologist William King made a bold proposal that the skull of the cave represented a distinct human species, another branch that separated from us long ago. He named it Homo neanderthalensis, man of Neander Valley.
This was the first time a fossil human had been assigned to a separate species from Homo sapiens, a different branch on our family tree, a landmark moment in science. Now, to be clear, naming it didn't mean immediate acceptance. That took decades. But something had changed. For the first time, the scientific community began to seriously consider a profound idea. We are not alone in our lineage. And this was just the beginning. A wave of excavations and discoveries would soon follow, reshaping our understanding of who we are and where we come from. Over the decades following the discovery of the Neanderthal skull, the theory of evolution began to gain credibility with emerging evidence. And the world grew genuinely curious. Who were our ancestors? Where did we come from? And how did we evolve? Archaeologists and paleoanthropologists had a field day. Excavations happened and more fossils were discovered.
Each more different and surprising and remarkable and shocking than the next. The challenge then fell to the scientists to place the fossils on the tree of life. But how do scientists decide the position of a species on the tree?
To decide that, after a fossil is discovered, paleoanthropologists rely on three pieces of evidence to place a fossil on a tree. In the book Evolution, a Human Story, Dr. Alice Roberts
Puts it rather beautifully as bones, stones, and genes. First, the bones. Almost every bone has something to say about the species, from skulls, brain size, and therefore cognitive capabilities. From teeth, their diet. From the shape and size of ribs, the energy demand. From the shape of pelvis, thickness of femur, and shape and placement of the big toe, we infer bipedalism and physical activity. The roughness of the bones where muscles attach can give an idea of the relative muscle use and therefore activity patterns. By comparing these features across fossils, scientists begin to map relationships. Which species is closer to which, and which species branched off earlier. Second, the stones. While bones tell us who they were, stones tell us what they did. These early species used tools made of stone. Depending on the stone tool design, we know what they did with it. So, their lifestyle. Depending on the sophistication of the stone tool design, we know how skilled their hands were and how smart their minds were. Sometimes, residue on the stone tools tell us the animals they hunted or nuts they cracked. So, their diet. Third, the genes. By comparing how many mutations separate two species' DNA, scientists can estimate how long ago they shared a common ancestor. The more differences, the older the split. This lets scientists place species on the family tree and date their divergence. Besides these three, fossils are also dated, placing them on a timeline.
Thanks to these tools, as fossils of new species took their place on the tree, new fossils of already established species either strengthened their positions on the tree or revised their positions to fit in new evidence.
And thus, scientists built the genus Homo branch in the tree of life, piece by piece, or rather, stem by stem and branch by branch. And soon, the world realized that we were never alone.
But how and why does a single lineage split into so many branches? To understand that, we need to understand the force that causes the diversity of life forms: natural selection.
About 25 years before publishing his book, Charles Darwin set out on his famous 5-year voyage aboard the HMS Beagle. One of the stops was the Galapagos Islands. And there, Darwin observes something remarkable. Tortoises from dry islands, islands which are relatively dry and have scarce vegetation on the ground, differed significantly from tortoises on lush islands. Islands which had a lot of undergrowth and vegetation was abundant. Dry island tortoises had saddle-shaped shells with a raised front, allowing them to stretch their necks up to reach higher vegetation, whereas tortoises from lush islands had dome-shaped shells suited to grazing on low vegetation.
So Darwin, in his book, writes, as many more individuals of each species are born that can possibly survive, and as, consequently, there is a frequently recurring struggle for existence, it follows that any being, if it vary however slightly in any manner profitable to itself, under the complex and sometimes varying conditions of life, will have a better chance of surviving and thus be naturally selected. In simpler words, it means in a given environment, when there is a struggle for survival, the organism that has traits, however small they may be, that makes it more suitable to the environment, will have a higher chance of survival. Over generations, these advantageous traits become more common and become a characteristic that would set these set of organisms apart, consequently giving rise to a new subspecies or a species or an organism entirely. In the case of tortoises of the Galapagos dry islands, at least one tortoise was born with a slight variation, maybe a little longer neck or a dome shape that allowed it to reach vegetation that its peers couldn't. Its descendants and their descendants that inherited this particular characteristic better survived. And soon, this became a physical trait that set these tortoises apart. The tortoises that did not possess this physical trait faced malnourishment over time and either migrated or their lineage slowly died out. This is probably the most important rule of nature that we see in every life form's evolution.
That is why Even carrying heavy loads at extreme altitudes, the Sherpa people are exceptionally well adapted to climbing Mount Everest. That is why the Bajau people can go underwater and actively hunt fish for long durations, sometimes for several minutes. And that is why our lineage split into multiple species, each suited to its environment.
Now that we have a strong foundation, let us put it all together to trace the journey of man from the jungles of Africa to every corner of the world.
Back then, the African continent looked much different than today. It was a world of extraordinary ecological richness. It had everything: volcanic highlands, river systems, lake shores, forest patches, woodlands, and open grasslands. The animals that moved through this world were different too. While Dinotheria drank at the waterline, hipparions, a three-toed relative of the horse, moved in herds across open grounds. And among the trees and forest edges, apes, a diverse variety of them. Among them was a particular group, relatively small, capable of walking upright on two legs, but still comfortable in the trees. Competing for survival with their peers, some populations of these apes began to spend more time outside woodlands, moving into more open environments.
And something interesting began to happen with this group of apes: natural selection. As the tall grass of these grasslands hid the predators well, these apes, which can stand upright on two legs, had an advantage. They could spot the predators and steer clear of them. Standing up also made finding food easier on these grasslands.
Over many generations, bipedalism became the default trait for these ape populations. As environments shifted, so did diets. As fruits growing on trees were scarce in grasslands, these apes lived off underground tubers and roots. Some apes learned to use their freed up front limbs to grip stones and used them as tools to dig through the soil to find these edible roots. They even lived off dead animal remains left behind by predators. And the stone tools came in handy to break the bones and eat the marrow, or strip small bits of flesh off the bone that the large animals missed. These tools helped them access calorie dense food.
And with every passing generation, only those apes that had the traits that are more suited to the environment they lived in survived, which also meant diversification. An ape of a grassland that lived near a river was different from an ape that lived on volcanic highlands, both in appearance and abilities, and over generations became an entirely different species. And very soon, these ape populations multiplied and occupied every environmental niche of Africa.
Slowly, the selection pressures of the environment changed these groups of apes. In appearance and lifestyle, curved finger bones once used for climbing now became straighter. The big toe, once opposable, aligned with others, improving balance and walking efficiency. Nutrition-rich food led to smaller teeth and jaws, less projected face, and a larger brain. They were already past this very blurry boundary that they couldn't be called apes anymore, but became the first human species.
These first human species were way more advanced than their ancestors ever were. They lived in small social groups and probably communicated through a combination of signs and sounds.
As populations became larger, competition for food became fiercer. Climate changes caused due to the Milankovitch cycles led to shortage in food. For survival, groups of these early humans moved out of African continent, tracking herds of animal migrations, and began to spread across the planet. Some species remained in the hot African climates, while some ventured far into the cold northern Europe. Some traveled to Asia and lived on the fertile plains, while some crossed seas and lived on small islands. They learned to plan and strategize and hunted in groups. Tools got more efficient and sophisticated. Spears helped them hunt from a distance, and soon they became expert hunters.
They realized that meat and plants that burnt in forest fires were much easier to chew and swallow and tasted way better. So they learned to make and control fire and started to eat cooked food. Because cooked food digests easier, their guts became smaller, freeing up energy that evolutionarily helped their brains get bigger. With social bonds, better tools, fire, and a smarter brain, they slowly began to rise up the food chain.
They learned how seeds can be planted, how to tend to those saplings so they would one day provide them fruits and vegetables. This early form of agriculture helped them settle down, and these settlements grew to become villages, which became towns, which turned into cities, and got so big they became civilizations. If we look at this evolution from a species perspective, arguably the first human species is the Homo habilis evolved in Africa. From it came the Homo ergaster. Groups of Homo ergaster moved out of Africa and populated Asia and evolved to become Homo erectus, while some Homo ergaster that remained in Africa became Homo heidelbergensis. Some groups of Homo heidelbergensis moved to Europe, of which few evolved to become Homo neanderthalensis, while few others became Homo denisovans. Some of the Homo heidelbergensis that remained in Africa became Homo sapiens, the modern humans. We crossed the open ocean and spread to Australia, got from Asia via Beringia to reach the Americas, and soon we were everywhere. But the question still remains, where are these other human species now?
So, for over the past century and a half, we have discovered fossils of multiple human species across the world, and we have dated them.
When we plot the results on a timeline with time on the x axis and species on the y axis, we notice something interesting, something remarkable. Since around 3 lakh year mark up until 40,000 years ago, at any point in time, there were at least one other human species sharing our planet with us. At around 1 lakh year mark, there were at least 4 different human species coexisting.
And as if that is not crazy enough, there is evidence that we did way more than just coexist. 1. We fought. There is some evidence of violence in the archaeological record which suggests that these species may have fought and killed each other. It may have been over food, over territory, or over resources. There is this pattern that is consistently observed that when Homo sapiens enter new regions, the local populations of other human species slowly declined and disappeared. Local traditions and technologies slowly declined and disappeared. It may have been a direct conflict or just a competition for survival. But one thing is for sure, more often than not, we won and our cousins lost. 2. We connected. Not all encounters led to conflict. Some led to connections. Modern genetic evidence shows that these human species have in fact interbred, and that includes us, Homo sapiens. Today's people of European and Asian ancestry have about 1 to 2% of Neanderthal DNA. Some populations of Asia and Oceania have DNA of Denisovans. In 2012, archaeologists found remains of a female who lived 90,000 years ago and was born to a Denisovan father and a Neanderthal mother, a first generation hybrid. So, our story is not just of survival, it's a story of competition, of conflict, and of coexistence. And our cousins, they are not entirely gone, but they live on within us. As you may have already noticed, the story of our past is quite complex. It's like assembling a vast and intricate puzzle, where each piece is a fragment of evidence, a tooth, a bone, or a footprint. And the big picture, the story of us, humans. Sometimes a single discovery can bring the entire picture into focus. Sometimes it can also force us to rethink the entire picture. But with every new evidence and the powerful tools that we now have to study them, the big picture is becoming clearer. Thank you for watching. To see more such videos in your feed, please subscribe to the channel. Until next time, keep asking why.